Leaders without education create bad habits. Follow me. Let's go. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Victory Leaders Lounge podcast. Today, I'm going to be talking about a really cool subject. We're going to be talking about diversity and inclusion, which for an old retired soldier is going to be kind of interesting and fun. But I have Taylor with me today. She has a company called Metanoia Innovative Solutions. I don't know, when we were talking before the call, I couldn't say that innovative word. I've said it multiple times. But anyway, Taylor, I'm happy to have you on the call. Can you tell us a little bit about you and what you're trying to do with your company today?
Yes, absolutely. So my name is Taylor. I am a nurse by trade. I've been a nurse for about 14 years, and I am a woman of color that has risen to some pretty decent levels within my career path in healthcare. And I have recently started a company, which is Metanoia Innovative Solutions, where I am offering transformational life coaching as well as breath work, theta healing, and I will be adding Reiki into that soon. And even some of the core fiber of my business and my reasons why, which there's a lot of them, but one of my biggest ones is to create more diversity in the space of coaching and healing. To even if somebody sees me and they're like, what's that breathwork thing? Well, you know what? She looks like me. I'm going to give it a shot, because there's just not a lot of diversity yet. And I hope to change that narrative for my kids and for future generations. So I am doing the things and showing up and doing all the uncomfortable growth stuff. So I'm happy to be here.
Oh, happy to have you here. And you know what you just got done saying that kind of resonates with me is that connection piece. You know, oftentimes you see people doing things and they're successful doing things, but you always feel like success is out of reach for you. But if you're a woman or a woman of color, or maybe you come from a neighborhood that's not so great and you've risen above that and you're able to talk about those things and show other people that, heck yeah, man, it can be done. You know, then you know, there's going to be a young lady somewhere, or maybe a gang member somewhere, or some guy who's from the middle of nowhere that grew up in a bad neighborhood, kind of like I did, that will say, I can do this. I mean, if he can do it, I can do it. Or if she can do it, I can do it. So thank you. And that's kind of why we're talking about this subject today, because you said that you have extensive experience with not only diversity and inclusion, but also making programs out of it. So I don't have that experience. And so, yeah, let's kind of talk about it. So diversity and inclusion could mean a lot of things, but what does it mean to you?
Diversity and inclusion. So as we go through, this episode, I get so irritated with like the tag words, and I have to rise to the occasion, because it's just now like becoming a thing where people want to say, "Oh, we're diverse and we're inclusive." Well, what does that actually mean? Like, to me, I was born as a woman of color. Like, so it was never a choice. It was never a decision for me to have to look at things and say, oh, how can I be more inclusive? But for me, it means that I get to show up as my authentic self, that I don't have to, I'm going to throw out some terms and I'm happy to like explain them, but I don't have to code switch. I don't have to speak one way at work and then speak a different way with my friends and family. I get to be Taylor no matter where I go. The inclusion piece of that is that everybody is welcome. I'm going to honor you and work with you as the human being that you are, and for all the differences that we have, and as well as the similarities. So for me, it's really more about how I live, how I show up, how I interact with other people, because I don't get to choose. And most people that are in marginalized communities might relate to that, because when you are born and raised in a certain, sector of the world or country, these things are way more prevalent. And I was fortunate to grow up where I didn't experience a lot of racism growing up, but boy, did I experience it when I got out into the into the workforce. And some of the comments that have been said to me and some of the experiences that I've had have like mortified me, and I didn't know what to do about it. So it has become like that passion for me, because I have 5 kids, and I hope and pray that they're not having these conversations when they're old enough to be doing podcasts and starting companies and navigating their way. Like it's just like it's time for it to come to an end. And systemic racism is bigger than you or I can tackle, by ourselves. But the more people that are aware and willing to look into it and be, allies and accomplices in this work, the more of a difference and impact we can make.
This is supposed to be America, the land of opportunity. And, you think about it, you think opportunity, and everybody from every other country wants to come here. But these are the things that we deal with. And it's easy for me to say that, right? Because I'm this white guy in a collared shirt on the other side of a call. I mean, you would think that for me that there's all this opportunity out there. But I grew up with everybody talking about, and pardon me for saying so, but they would say things about black people. I grew up in the Midwest, in the middle of Iowa. So they would say things about black people and Mexican people and Indian people. And, as a young person, as a young child, that was very, very confusing to me. And, I never really went along with the narrative because I just didn't understand why you would say something about somebody that you never met before, or why you wouldn't accept them for any certain way. And so it was wonderful that I went to the military, because guess what? If you were an E1 or an E3, or if you were a general, you were treated a certain way because, you have to treat a general with respect. And that E3, that private's going to be washing the dishes and mopping the floor. I mean, there's opportunity for everyone. And that's when I really understood that it doesn't matter who you are or where you come from. Everyone. It doesn't matter what you look like, what gender you are, where you come from. Everyone has something to bring to the table. And it really opened my eyes. And it was like, what? I really came from an environment where people just had their minds closed off. And so really, now that you kind of defined what you said, diversity and inclusion was, it's just, to me, it's open-mindedness and being willing to accept anybody, regardless of what they believe, what they look like, and how they think. So I think it's beautiful. And I don't understand how this can be the land of opportunity, and we still have people that discriminate against those things.
It's like so simple that it's stupid. And it's like, it's like, and not to be frank or like make light of the situation, but I was born in the Midwest. I was born in Indiana and grew up in the south suburbs of Chicago. And so I totally get it. I went to Catholic school. Like I get it. Like it's so simple that people struggle to just acknowledge, like, I care because I honor human beings. Whatever your experience is, I don't care what your religion is. Personally, I'm Christian and I believe in God. I have friends that are atheists. Like that has nothing to do with me. Now, like how you choose to live your life, what you do, what you wear, like that, who am I to judge you? And that's just how I show up for other people. I will honor people's, chosen names, their pronouns, whatever it is. Like good people and bad people are still there. So all of the rest of it, I just want to acknowledge people and honor them for being here and being in my space or being in my, my world, basically, because I we all have different lived experiences, and growing up in the Midwest, like it's pretty run of the mill. Like I have spent the last 20 years in Western New York prior to moving to California. And I have just always been around different groups of people. So I didn't even realize when things started happening to me that they had any type of racial undertones. And I say that as a woman of color, that I didn't even understand that when people told me like, oh, well, why are you being aggressive? Why are you're not a team player? And I'm like, well, wait a minute, can you give me an example? And they couldn't. Then I started to understand, because I'm literally speaking the same way that I'm speaking right now is how I talk at work. It's how I talk at home. This is like my normal tone of voice. I don't yell at people. I barely yell at my kids. I'm not going to yell at somebody in the workplace. So when I was told I was aggressive, like what about me? I'm barely 5'4". What about me made you think that I had this, this aggressive demeanor? And I was told, and this is one of my first mentors, and she was a white woman, and she, said, Taylor, I'm going to tell you something, and I don't want you to take this the wrong way, but honey, you cannot stand with your arms folded in meetings. Like, you look very, resistant, aggressive, defensive, like all this stuff. Had she not told me that early on in my career, I don't know that I would be where I am, because nobody was telling me either. And it really was uncomfortable because, one, I'm anemic. I'm always cold. So me standing with my arms folded is definitely, like, now that I do more spiritual work, I understand it was a protection mechanism, but I was literally just cold, and it was a comfortable body position. So I have consciously, for like the last 10 or 15 years, I think about how I'm being looked at by others in a meeting, and I will stand with my hands folded in front of me, or I'll stand with my hands behind me, and I talk with my hands because that's how I talk. So it's really weird when you're navigating and you have to be cautious about who you are. Literally, if you talk with your hands, you talk with your hands. But because I'm a Black woman, I have to worry about someone perceiving me as the angry Black woman, the resistant Black woman. And it's like, dude, I'm here to do my job and get my check like the rest of y'all. Like, there's nothing, if nothing else is similar. We signed up for a job, we show up for work because we have bills, we have obligations to take care of. If I don't like this job, I have enough common sense to look for another job. Like, sure. It's that simple. But it was very eye-opening, but I'm so thankful that I did meet people along my way that would tell me and give me those harsh truths of like, I don't like this any more than you do, but this is the reality of what you're dealing with. And this is like bigger than you. And I had a decision to make. Do I continue to excel and show up the way that I show up in this career? Or do I, say, hey, I'm not changing anything? And I did find myself making a lot of changes to like who I was and how I operated, and almost to a fault at times, because then it was like I was trying to be something that I wasn't. And it's been a journey to get back into a zone where I'm like just comfortable and I can be myself and express my ideas without it being seen as resistance. Like, just because I disagree, maybe I have more questions. Maybe I need someone else to explain it so it makes a little bit more sense and it clicks for me. But when race is a factor in all of that, there's like, I'm working 10 times harder in my head than most people are, all day to be on and to do my job at work. It's exhausting.
I'll be honest with you. If somebody told me I was being racist, it would confuse me, because I don't think like that. But on the other side of that, what you're talking about, also from a leadership perspective, right? You got to think about body language when you're communicating with others in a professional environment, because even this, and I teach this stuff, so I'm not trying to play devil's advocate, but when you practice active listening and you're trying to make the other person comfortable in the conversation and not you, body language, tone of voice, eye contact, all of those things play into a lot, but there are some underlying things. I'll be honest with you. When I'm talking to somebody and they're new, and I don't even know if it's a diversity thing, but if somebody is louder than I'm used to, then it makes me feel funny. If somebody is really soft, I also really don't know how to react to that, because am I going to offend this person? I mean, I'm kind of outgoing myself. So am I going to say something to hurt this person's feelings? So, I mean, all of those things are very interesting. And I have met people that have had conversations with somebody, whether it be a person of color or a person of another nationality, maybe Asian or Indian or something like that. And then say, oh, I can't believe that person was acting this way. You know, if they had an accent, they would say, you know, why are they even around here and all that other stuff. And if we're going to break the bias, if we're really going to fix this, then really, I like that there are programs for this sort of thing, because it brings these things to light, and it tells people that are not as open-minded as they should be that it's not going to be tolerated. And, you know, they may not directly, knowingly to that other person that's in the conversation, be keeping them from opportunities, or it may not overly seem like they're treating them differently. But people do have, you know, when you get to the big boy levels in an organization, they have conversations about these things, and those things do come up.
1,000%.
And you know, it's not fair. So now that there are programs for this, I'm just curious, you know, I was in the military, and these things, you know, we got in a lot of trouble for treating somebody different because of a belief or anything like that, just because, you know, at the end of the day, we had to rely on the person to our right and left if we take off to go in a combat zone. So you better not be mistreating your brother or sister.
Exactly.
That's just bottom line, case closed. I mean, that's the law, right? But in corporate America or in the civilian work structure, I'm just curious to hear from you how this is discussed at maybe a corporate level, because I think you have experience with that.
Yeah, so I actually have worked for, I mean, pretty much my whole career since I became a nurse has been in healthcare, either in home care or in reproductive health care mainly. And what I have seen, and I'll give some tips here too of what I value when I am seeking employment in that sector, is not only do the companies, you know, now everybody kind of has that little diversity inclusion statement. I want to see, you know, employee resource groups. I want to see people, the company, the organization actually putting money into training all of their staff on implicit bias. Because I will tell you that I took a training years ago, and I thought because I was Black that I didn't have implicit bias. I'm like, oh, that doesn't apply to me. Oh, yes, it does. I just had no awareness. I'm thinking because I am a marginalized piece of the population that this was not possible for me. So I had to get stretched beyond what I thought. I'm like, oh, I'm open-minded. I used to make this comment to say, oh, I don't care if people are yellow, blue, purple. You know, actually, that's like really disrespectful. And I had no idea, because there are no yellow, green, blue, or purple people. People are brown, people are white, people are different shades. But it was almost what I began to understand was that when people made those comments, they were literally saying they didn't see me. And when people, I've had this happen, and it still happens, and I lovingly call people in. But when people are like, oh, yeah, I'm not racist, I have a Black friend. I'm like, ooh, girl, don't say that. So it's a lot of the language has changed. And while you can't keep up with the terms necessarily, unless you're really in that work, it's really important to just listen when you are called in. We've switched to say, instead of calling, I'm calling you out, I'm calling you in. I'm going to let you know that maybe your intent was this, but this was the impact and this is how that landed. So for me, the company that I would, that I want to be a part of are ones that are not just doing those check in the box. Oh, we offer implicit bias 101. It's so much more than just implicit bias. That is a great foundation. So I don't say that to be discouraging, because this is an overhaul of literally, this is diving into systemic racism, and it wasn't created overnight. And I have accepted that it will not be eradicated overnight. But when a company puts the training and support, and like I said, the employee resource groups, when they actually show we're creating these spaces for people to honor their differences at work, that's what speaks to me as an employee. Like, they actually give a damn. They are not just trying to put that check in the box and say that they offer this diversity training. It's just like going through HIPAA or OSHA. Like, we all have to do these things because we work in healthcare. There are these rules and regulations, but to really feel valued and seen, that's kind of how I look at it. When people put the resources and the funding and create a budget for it, because when you're working, everybody's like, oh, there's no money for that. And I've been in non-for-profit for the majority of my career. There's no money for that. There's no money for that. There's money for whatever you want to make it be for. And there are donors and there are different grants. There's all types of stuff if you're willing to put in the work. So if a company is willing to put in the work and honor and acknowledge in those ways, those are things that I personally like. I really I'm drawn to when I'm looking for employment, and I aim to do the same thing in my company, to really provide that level of transparency and openness where if somebody's confused, they can just ask. It's better for them to ask and get the clarification, or at least get my perspective, than to walk around scared to talk to people that are different than them because they're like, oh, I don't want to say the wrong thing. We're human. You're going to make a mistake. Apologize and move on. That's all you got to do. Like, it's really that simple. Now, if you keep doing it, that's a different conversation. But if somebody's brought it to your attention and they can bring it to your awareness of like, I can see, and you don't have to understand completely, but just honor that person's, experience and what they're telling you, how it made them feel. And that will go, that goes a long way. That simple acknowledging, kindness, compassion, and mending that relationship and moving forward, especially at work. It's like so important.
Yeah. I will say when younger JJ or maybe PFC Hardy back in the day, when I first went on active duty, I left from here in Iowa and went there. And I'll be honest with you, I was very ignorant. I didn't have anything against anybody, but I definitely mirrored some of the language that I grew up with. And I mean, when you are in a place where it's predominantly one race, there's things that are unacceptable in other races or in other cultures that if you've never been exposed to it, you just don't know. And you'll have people looking at you like you have something funny growing from your forehead, and then they turn around and walk away and go say something to somebody about it. And then next thing you know, you have your supervisor coming up to you saying, hey, did you say this? And I'm like, well, yeah, I did. Well, did you know that you violated this policy, this policy, this policy, and this policy? How is that a violation of policy? I don't understand. So I like what you're saying, where you have these employee resource groups or even intuitive enough leaders in organizations to be able to pull somebody off to the side and have a structured conversation to bring attention to it, not necessarily to say you can't work here or you're racist or you're not accepting of other cultures or something like that, but just to say that this is not necessarily wrong, but who you said it to and their culture, they have certain beliefs that when you say that, this is what it means. And I was lucky enough that I had decent enough people where they would start off the conversation, hey, it's the military, of course. But
Mhm.
hey, look, dummy, check it out. You can't say that because of this. And I'd be like, oh, oops. And then
I
of
wish
course
it
I'd
could
want
be that straightforward sometimes. Be like, look here, stupid. Like, not to, like to make it more like personable. Like, cause in my outside of work, I would talk like that, like, come
yes,
here, like, come here, dummy. Like,
yep,
and I could, but when you hear my tone and you see my face and I'm smiling and I'm laughing, you wouldn't feel that you're going to get fired for something. So for me, that, yes, that communication, because you don't know what you don't know until you don't know it, and it is not your fault, just like it wasn't my fault where you were born, how you were raised, the circumstances that you grew up in. But when you get out and you know different, you can make the choice to do different. So like that's where I come from, where I I'm not my circumstances. I'm not those things, but I am proudly, existing in this space now. And I'm taking up that space that maybe my ancestors were afraid to be vocal about these things.
mm-hmm.
That's not my story. It's not, that's not, I honor that. And I love, I'm learning to love all of the things that make me me. And that's the process. When the world is not your friend, when you are, when you hear that. And I honor the military. I know when we first spoke, I'm like, thank you so much for your service. And I have people in my family that are in the military. When people say the land of the free, like, we're Black people in particular, because that's where I identify. We're not free. Like, I had to have a conversation with my Black son, like the conversation years ago. He's 15 now, about how to act if he's ever out with his friends and they're approached by the police, because my son wouldn't hurt a fly, but he's a Black man existing in America. So like, I was just under the impression of like, oh, I'm just going to teach my kids to be good people and be nice. And, I was lovingly called in by, I was in an African American leadership development program that literally changed my life. But they were like, you haven't had the talk with your son? And I'm like, no, what talk? I just tell my kids to be great, carry on, be nice, be respectful. They were like, you need to think about that. And I came home and I talked to my husband about it. And like, it was like, yes, it's time. He's 6 foot tall now. And it's really scary, the thought, as a mother, and this is like outside of work, but like as a mother, the thought that my kid could be walking to the store and be approached because they look like somebody else, and because of the nature of police and authority with people of color in particular. Like, it's a scary thought to think of your kid not making it back home in one piece from going to grab a juice at 7-Eleven. Like, that's the reality of a Black person. A lot of Black people, and myself in particular, is like, just safety. So when you're at work, I don't want to feel unsafe at work. I want to be able to have those conversations that people can say, it's not that I'm perfect because I'm Black. That doesn't make me an expert in these matters. It just makes me have a different perspective, that I value those direct conversations. I'm like you. I'm a very direct person, and when I have people that are my team and they're super soft spoken, I'm like, oh Lord, like, how am I gonna like soften up a little bit? That's not me. I'm not this warm, fuzzy, like, give you a hug and let's talk about your feelings. Like, that's just not me. And but I have team members that are, and I have to, as their leader, make those conscious decisions to make sure that they know that they can approach me. So I really value being able to have those direct conversations with people, because you don't know until you know. And now once you know, if you continue to behave that way, then I start to think, well, maybe this person is racist, but that's also never for me to determine. Like, I've actually never said that to a white identified person of like, oh, I think that's a little bit racist. I don't even really use that word. I'll say, I don't, maybe you didn't mean this, but this is how that came off. That's more how I have conversations, because it's racism statistically is very, like, it's up there with pedophilia. Like the great fears of the world is like people are more terrified to be identified, or as terrified to be identified as racist as they are to be identified as a pedophile. And that's like some stark difference, but that's reality. When you put people, if I were to approach a conversation with a white identified person and say, hey, bud, I think you're racist, you shut down. You lose the opportunity to even receive what else I have to offer, because now I've accused you and I've put you into a place of fear and angst and all these other emotions that if I could have just said, hey, can I speak to you really quick? I overheard how you said this to this person. And from my perspective, that was a little insensitive or rude. And this is why. You might actually say, you know what, Taylor, thanks. Versus if I just came up and said, dude, you're racist, you'd be like, well, screw you. You know, like I'm not racist. And now you're defensive. So you're not hearing anything. So that approach of being direct and personable is everything.
Well, you know, even to this day, with my 18 years of exposure, being all over the world in different environments, even in different countries, with people that they're nothing like they are over here, you know, I still have run into situations where I'm just genuinely confused because I don't know how to get to interact with that. But back to young PFC or Sergeant Hardy, back in my younger days, one thing that I ran into a lot was, great, I got corrected. I was explained why something I said would make somebody else feel uncomfortable or offended or what have you. How do I best say this? So I would go up and talk to that person that I potentially offended, because that's just me. That's always been me. I'd want to be like, oh my God, I had no idea that what I said was offensive. And I was just told by so-and-so that could be construed as something that could either hurt your feelings or make you feel like you're being discriminated against. And I want to apologize. Well, how do you, I will just say that is something that usually, in my experience, makes the other person that has already been offended feel super uncomfortable. Then you're like, I can't. It's almost like when a man is talking to their wife. It's like a no-win situation. So, have you been in an experience where you've helped kind of mediate something like that to let somebody know that, hey, you know, he just genuinely doesn't know, and maybe help smooth that situation out on one of your teams?
There's a fine line, and I've actually taught on this about not making when you, so there's a couple things there. When you apologize for the behavior, the comment, the interaction, not making it about you, because it then can make the person, you'd be like, oh my God, I'm mortified. I can't believe I didn't mean that. And now the person that you offended is consoling you, because they're like, oh no, it's fine. It's not that big a deal. So there's a super, super fine line of again, that calling in piece and like how you have that conversation. And it's really important to just acknowledge it. I'm sorry, move on. Because when you don't, it ends up shifting back to like you being the victim. And then it takes away from that. It takes away from the apology. Because like now I'm apologizing to you and I didn't do anything. I was just here and this happened. So yeah, it can be very tricky to have, like, these conversations should not be this difficult, but they are. You know, sure. Like that's just sure. Where we are here in 2023, that we're still even having these conversations. But just literally going in and apologizing. So I've had to facilitate these conversations. I've had to clean up the messes after these conversations, because I have had that person, you know, that was trying to be, I've seen it on both sides. I've seen the person that was trying to apologize come to me like, oh my God, now it blew up. Now it's worse. I think this person hates me, and I'm consoling them. And then I've had the person that was the possible person that was offended come to me and have this assumption of just that unspoken relatability, because they're of a marginalized community. I'm of a marginalized community. So there's like this just we get each other piece. But when when I'm on and I'm at work, it's more than that. So I have to treat everybody the same. I have to give the same responses, because one other thing that I learned very early in my career, people's perception is their reality. So however I show up for my white identified staff, I have to show up for the Black, my Asian, and any other, ethnicity or culture that I interact with on a regular basis. Because when you're a leader at work, whatever field you're in, you're their person, you're their go-to. You're in your role for a reason. So if you can't lead effectively with a diverse team, that's when you raise your hand as a leader and you ask for help. I have messed up myself, and I've called my own department, my own organization's department of, we have a group of diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's an actual department. And I've called and said, oh my God, I think that I said something, and how do I make sure I never do this again? And how do I make this right with my team? I had to eat that as a Black woman. Like, I had to understand that my visceral response to a situation as a leader wasn't appropriate, and it might have offended somebody. So it's even more challenging when you're in a leadership role and you have to think from multiple sides of the table. I can't just think as Taylor. I can't just think of the Black woman. I can't think of the mom. I have to be like, oh my gosh, like, I'm these people's boss. And I use boss and leader interchangeably, because I'm a servant leader at heart. Like, I won't ask my team to do something I wouldn't do myself. I've plunged toilets. I don't give a crap about your title. I give a crap about how you treat me, and I care about how I treat you. So, like, for me, that's how I lead. But that's what makes me super effective at my job. Because if my team can come and feel valued as themselves as individuals, they're going to work harder for me, which allows me to be better at my job, and everybody wins. But if people are feeling closed off and like, well, I'm just going to do the bare minimum because she doesn't give a crap about me, I've had that experience too. So it's really, I've had a multitude of those experiences that throughout my career, that I feel like the more it sucks that they still happen, but the more that I have to have those conversations, the more fluent I get. If it happens once a year, it feels like, wait, what do I say? Don't say the wrong thing, the wrong term. I still have that fear.
Yeah.
But the more I have it, the more people talk about it, the easier it gets.
Sure. Well, I really appreciate your perspective, and I agree with everything you're saying, and honestly, sometimes as a white man in a leadership environment growing up through the years, I've had very diverse teams. So once I got my first promotion, I had a rude awakening, and thankfully, this is the one thing I tell everybody. You don't always get to choose your boss, but I have been so blessed throughout my career as an adult leader in almost every situation that I've had people help me through situations rather than just, hey, you dummy, every situation, and just make me feel like bottom of the barrel. So I've really been groomed for everything. And I think what you're saying kind of goes along with that. And regardless of how you feel about it, you got to have that personal courage to address it anyway. And sometimes it's not even you addressing it. If somebody feels uncomfortable with you and they've come to you and said, well, I think he might have some beliefs about me and he just treated me such and such a way. I don't really want to tell you much about it. I don't want to get him in trouble, but he made me feel uncomfortable. But that they talk to a supervisor down the way all the time about things like this.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you got to pull people in, and that's been my experience because I've dealt with this a lot. I say that I haven't, but there's an equal opportunity program within the military that requires you to make sure you include everybody to a certain extent, try to, and not treat people different based on race and background and all that other stuff. I guess DEI is just the civilian way of saying it. And being able to leverage others is also a great quality to have as a leader. And because I'm that typical white male, you know, that I'm just going to be honest with you. In a lot of situations, it can be easier for me to have opportunities because of that. And I have people know that sort of thing, and they just think that, you know, I can't go to him because everything's been easy for him. They don't know my background, but you know, from the outside looking in, that's exactly what it is. I mean, I did grow up poor and I had nothing, and I did have to work my way from the bottom all the way to the top. But, you know, that is how people see me before they get to know me. So that is definitely one of those things that I've had to deal with. So this has been an awesome topic. I think anybody who works with you is going to get a wealth of knowledge and experience. And more than anything, I just appreciate you taking the time to meet with me on my show. If you're on YouTube, you'll obviously be able to see this. But if you are on any other platform, whether it's iHeartRadio or Spotify, right now at the bottom of my screen, I have her email address, and it's Metanoia innovativesolutions.com. Hey, yes. I almost screwed it up that time. And Metanoia is METANOIA innovativesolutions.com. So if you want to get in touch with Taylor, that's probably the best way to do it. But I think I want to keep people interested, so we should probably cut this podcast off, but I'd love to have you on sometime. Your insight to things is just absolutely amazing. So thank you.
And I just want to say, and I just thank you so much for having me. And I want to honor you for using your platform, because literally, like, even with this is what changes the narrative. This is why I show up for this. Like, you as a white man using your platform and your just inherited privilege to create space, a safe space for people of color to come on and talk about these issues is so invaluable. So I just really appreciate you for creating the space.
Well, I just throw myself into the deep end. So I don't know if I'm going to get myself in trouble one of these times, but I'll do it if there's a way to do something.
Love that.
So is there anything that you would like to say to the audience before we completely conclude, Taylor?
I would just say, keep an open mind, keep having conversations. The Google is your friend. Don't be that person that's like, oh, I have a Black friend, let me go ask them all the things about lived experience for the Black community. Use Google, use podcasts. There are a lot of people that are vocal about their experiences. But just be open to the conversation and be open to accept that you might have some biases that you don't want to look at, but that's okay. That's what makes us human. Keep trying.
And you're absolutely right. And so this is what leadership is all about, people. It's learning, it's talking about all of these different topics, learning something new every day. And kind of the motto for my teachings is that leaders without education create bad habits. And if you're not willing to discuss these things and learn more about it, then you're just going to go on being your ignorant self. So make sure you open your mind, learn something new every day, because it's not just going to benefit you. If you're in a management or supervisor, or maybe you're a business owner, it's going to not just benefit you, it's going to benefit everyone that you surround yourself with and your team as well. So this was the Victory Leaders Lounge podcast. JJ Hardy and Taylor here. Have a good day.